Hello, and thank you for joining this video tutorial, which is just going to quickly show you how to render out some clips through After Effects. So there are actually a few options when it comes to exporting, and we're going to look at one of those. Okay, so I've got a clip here, which has a bit of tracking and an image composite on top. So that was the original clip. This is the new one, and we're done. And now I want to render this out. So what I can do is I can go File, Export, and you'll see there's actually a few options. And we're going to look at the one that just says add to render queue, which is the way of exporting just directly through After Effects. Add to render queue, and you'll see what it does is it loads up this render queue here. We've got three options that we can change. Okay, and so let's just have a quick look at what each one of those does. So you see there's an output module here which says lossless. So by default, After Effects will render out as a lossless. Well, it's set to render out as lossless. Now, what I would say is, unless you started off with lossless footage in the first place, there's no point now moving to a lossless format, because it won't add anything extra in regards to quality all of a sudden to your work, because you've already had compression applied. So in this video, I can't really go through perhaps the best option. I can show you an option I would use, which I find works very well, but I perhaps can't really suggest which would be the correct one for each person who's watching this video, because everyone will have slightly different requirements based on where the footage is going and also what they shot it at. So obviously you'll have to sort of consider that, and I'm always around to sort of support people with that. But let's just have a quick look at what we can select. So in this case, the footage was shot in ProRes, and so there's no point taking that compression off now. In other words, by going to lossless, it, like I said, just produces massive file sizes, which so not only will they take up a huge amount of hard drive space, but they'll also not even be able to be played back in real time. They'll be so large that my computer wouldn't even be able to play them back, so I can view them as they're supposed to be. They'd just be very jumpy. So I'm going to click lossless, and you'll see by default it's set to AVI. Okay, so we have a format, in other words, a container within which this sits, and you've got a range of them here. You'll see you've got some image sequences. If you're going to pick an image sequence, okay, what I would suggest you do is create a folder for your video to go in, because what will happen is every frame of that video will be stored as an image file. And just keep in mind, there'll be no well, I say there'll be no audio with it. It does have audio options, but I don't believe. Yeah, there you go. You'll see those grayed out, because obviously an image sequence, all you have is a like I said, an image for every frame. So if you had, say, a 2-second clip, you might end up with 50 images inside this folder. So it's worth sort of putting that separately. But yeah, in this case, I'm going to go for QuickTime, because that's kind of what I was initially shot at. But however, the container is only one part of the story. So within the container, you can have the codec itself existing. So just because it's a QuickTime file, that doesn't tell us what kind of compression we want to apply. So we'd go to Format Options. And you can see here we can select, and so you can adjust sort of the general quality settings depending on which codec you pick. But you can see this within a MOV file, you can have quite a large range of codecs anyway. This isn't even all of them. So I am limited by what I've got access to here through After Effects. And this is why we'll have a look at some other export options outside of After Effects in a separate video. But ProRes 422 is actually what this footage was shot at. But even if yours wasn't, and you need to render out through After Effects, I find ProRes 422 can be a good option to pick. It's designed for post-production work, and so most computers will handle it really well and be able to play back the footage with ease. And while it can be larger than, say, something like an MP4 in file size, I say it can be, it will be, but overall it's not it's not a massive sort of file, and it's usually quite manageable. So I pick something like that usually. Obviously the 422 refers to the chroma subsampling. If for any reason you had shot some footage that had 444, then you'd want to pick that instead. So obviously, you can look for the one that applies to you. I'm going to click that anyway. Click OK. So there we go. So you can see now it's saying custom QuickTime. The output to here is just selecting where you want to output it to. So you find the folder you want and you change the file name to whatever you'd like. Okay. Or if you're happy with the name of your comp, hopefully you are, you don't need to change it at all. Okay. So those are your kind of two most common settings that you would change on here. You will see it does have another option above which says render settings. And there's a few things you can sort of change in there. You've got things like, really it's about what you want to render, I'd say is the main reason I usually pop into here. So by default, it's rendering out whatever comes under the work area bar. And I'll show you that in a second, which is usually the whole comp. But if in case it's not, you can say, well, I want to render out the whole comp, or render out the work area, or you can go to custom, which will allow you to select a specific section of the video. So you can put in the start and end times, and it will render that out. Okay, I'm going to keep it at work area, and you can also even adjust the playback frame rate, which would affect the speed to some level. Depends what you want to change it to. Again, that's quite specific. You wouldn't normally sort of end up changing the playback frame rate, but yeah, there are a few bunch of options there, like I said, that you can affect if you need to. But most cases, like I said, it'll be these two that you do. Okay, now let's jump back. So I've done that. Now, because rendering can, well, it will most likely just sort of leave this, it will make After Effects unusable at that point while it's rendering out, so you won't be able to do anything with it while it's rendering. What we generally do is, with a queue-based system is that you queue up all the work that you want to do. So it doesn't mean that you have to render it at that point. You're just adding it to the list. So once you've done that, we can now jump into another clip, and I can carry on working with this. Okay, so this is a second clip, which also has some effects done. It's just generally a brightness change. So that was the original clip, and I've just sort of improved that. And now I might choose to just work on this. So I haven't rendered anything out, just added it to the queue. Also, notice this grey bar at the top. This is your work area bar, and you've got these two blue handles on either side that you can change. So let's say I decided actually I only want to render out that section. That is a work area bar. So with this clip, it wouldn't render the whole thing. It would only render what's in the work area. If you remember, that was on the settings. So you can adjust it that way. Okay. But yeah, in my case, no, you know what? I'll leave it there. Yeah, why not? Let's render out a shorter clip as well. So once I'm done with that, I'll go File, Export, same thing, Add to Render Queue, and you'll see it just adds it underneath the first one. And I just need to do the same thing. So again, it's set to lossless, and so I might choose again just to sort of go for a QuickTime ProRes, which is stored on there. Great, and just where it's going to go now. Because I've already set it up for the first one, it will be exporting in the same place anyway. So I'm quite happy to leave that, but you can see it's going to the same folder. Click Save. I'm happy with the name again. So the name comes right from the comp. So if you've named your comps correctly, you don't have to worry about that. And that's it. Don't need to adjust the best settings because remember, by default, it will already do work area. So it's going to only take that section. And so you just keep adding to your render queue. And then at some point, whenever you're kind of, say, going to step away from After Effects, and you're like, okay, I'm done. And by the way, it should, I believe, save this into your queue anyway. So whenever you come back, they're still there waiting. They're set up, ready to go. And, so the point is, at some point or that, we've got maybe a list of shots that we want to render out. And then we just go to the render button, click that, and it will just make its way through the queue, and we can now go off and do something else. Or if we're going for a break, that might be a good time to just leave it to render. In this case, they're very short clips, hence why it's rendered so quickly. But that is basically the process of using the render queue to export in After Effects. Thank you for watching.